I have with me today a gentleman by the name of Tom Price. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yes, yes.
Cool.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
I was put in touch with you by a mutual friend who said, you've got to speak to this guy. He's great. He's really fascinating. That was Grant from Barnabas Aid. So,
Fantastic.
um,
Yes.
just tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day job is now, because you're involved, if I get this right, with Maranatha School.
Yeah, that's right. I'm currently the head teacher of Maranatha Christian School. I've been doing this job for about 3.5 years. I actually took over from Grant in the summer of 2020. I've been doing it since, basically. Yeah.
So, what I mean, it's a Christian school. I went to a Church of England school. So is it something along those lines, or is it something a little different?
It's very different, actually. The school was started in 1990 by a group of Christian parents who were basically concerned with the direction of travel, shall we say, within the state education system. And I think they wanted an alternative for their children that really, from a worldview perspective, put God and the existence of God at the heart of education. And what I think they meant, and certainly what I understand it means today, is that when we look at the world around us, and you take the subject of science, for example, we look at it through the lens that there is purpose behind everything, that the world doesn't just exist for no reason, but rather that there's purpose and meaning, design, etc., behind everything that we see. And I think that does make a difference, that worldview. We've certainly found that with the students in terms of their approach to learning. And I think, as I said, that was the original motivation of those parents. The government won't fund Christian education, so therefore it has to be an independent school for that reason, and funded therefore by those parents. And its history has been one where parents, very much really from a middle class, working class background, have sent their children here and made massive sacrifices to do so. Because they did it out of a sense of conviction, like I said, that they wanted their children to be educated by teachers who loved the Lord Jesus, genuinely wanted to educate their children in a way that honored God. And I suppose, if you don't mind me saying so, that's the distinction between ourselves and, say, a typical church school. Because I think, obviously, the different church, the larger denominations that run schools, do so for lots of great reasons, but they're not really focused on, I think, Christian education as such. Their view would be to sort of provide a state school, if that makes sense, with an influence from a Christian perspective. Whereas we're more overt about it, and the parents who send their children here do so because they intentionally want those students to learn in an environment where God's name is honored and the curriculum reflects a conviction that God exists.
I went to a Church of England secondary school, which is perhaps not quite so common as maybe the classic kind of Church of England primary school, which there are many of. And it was a really good experience. One of my lasting memories, though, was we had a youth event at the big church where I was at the time in Wolverhampton, and the minister's son designed a poster to put on the walls to say, we've got a big youth event, come along. And I remember so clearly it got past the head teacher, it got past all the teachers, and it was the chaplain who said, absolutely no way we're going to advertise this. This is evil. This is terrible. And I remember I was in the Christian Union, so I was about 17 years old at A-levels, thinking, I can't actually comprehend what's wrong with this. And I said, what's the problem? Oh, it's just evil, because you've got a band and you've got musicians playing. And to this day, I still think, what kind of message are you sending?
Yeah.
And I said, look, she said, well, the person designed this obviously doesn't know Jesus. I said, look, this is a Christian. He happens to be the child of the largest church in Wolverhampton at that time, of sort of 400 or 500 people. And no, he definitely, no, absolutely not. And she refused. She refused to back down. So we couldn't advertise this big youth event. That's my memory of school. And it's something that is kind of, I suppose, impressed upon me because it was ostensibly a Christian school. It's Church of England supported, but I struggled sometimes to see the Christian influence beyond there's a cross and there's a chapel.
Well, and I think that's the point, is that I guess I have a lot of sympathy for trustees, for head teachers who are, involved in so-called church schools in that sense, because I think they must feel that they're under scrutiny to be fair and equitable, which is understandable. I get that, and they are serving a diverse population in that sense. I think that what we're very clear about really is that we target specifically Christian parents. I'm going to be real about that. So we recognise we're niche. We recognise that we have a particular focus, but we think that that's something that's attractive to many families who come from a Christian background. And the way I put it to parents is that we are a mission school, in effect, because if you think about it, you've got Christian parents who want their children to go to the school, but those children might not necessarily be Christian. So our role is to sort of be a good example to those young people, to be a witness to them, be very real about it, to share God's love with them in that context, so that they can see those children. I'm a great believer, you see, in sort of living it out. I'm constantly saying to the staff here, look, we're not about indoctrinating these children. It's not about creating religion or religious nuts, but it's really trying to sort of encourage them to understand that spiritual life is important. And the key to that is knowing Jesus Christ personally. So we will emphasize that with the children and young people here. And we hope by our example, help them to see what it is to live a Christian life. As teachers, the first thing we think we do is not just what we say with our mouths, but who we are and what we are and the life that we live, which is why it's so important that our teachers have lives of integrity and that their Christian witness and their life are identical, if that makes sense. Because I think there's nothing worse than being in a school that is so-called Christian, but those who are running it are not exhibiting the Christian life. I think, to me, it's like we've got to be what we say we are. And in that sense, then those children are seeing a consistency of approach, a wholeness. I mean, one of the things when I interview parents about bringing their children here, for example, I will say to them, what are your values in the home? Because what we really want is that the values of the school are mirrored in the home and vice versa, so that the message they get from their parents is the same message they get from us. Because another thing we try to do is to say to parents, look, we really want you to be involved in this school. We believe that's a biblical mandate for parents to be engaged in their children's education. So we welcome parents. We, for example, have a 3-hour commitment that parents have to make when their children join the school to be involved in one way or another. Some parents, admittedly, aren't able to fulfill that because of the demands of their work. They pay a little bit extra if that's the case. But in essence, what we're really trying to say is that it's good that parents are involved in the education of their children, and we don't want there to be too much of a distance between the two. And that's worked really well for us because there's a real sense of community amongst parents, staff and pupils. And we're very much, to coin a phrase, singing from the same hymn sheet with regard to what we do. And I think that's really, really important for, like I said, for parents. They know when they send their children here, they get what it says on the tin, that, the children are going to grow up, get a good education, but we're going to put a lot of focus on character development. And if you don't mind me saying so, the sort of characteristics we see exhibited in the life of Jesus: compassion, understanding, thoughtfulness, etc. All the sort of things you talk about, the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, those things. Because when our students graduate, our vision for them is that they graduate as disciples of Jesus. Because discipleship, in essence, is about teaching. It's about your teaching conforming with your lifestyle. So when the students leave here, we look at it from a mission point of view. Where we feel we serve the churches is we hope that children leave us at 16 years of age with a mature faith, a good character and a good education. And they're ready to serve their society, but they're also ready to serve in their churches. And I think that's a really important aspect of education, that we look at it like that. We don't see ourselves as an end in itself, but we see ourselves as part of the process, working with the local church to help these young people to grow in their faith and to be effective in giving back to their community. And I think that's the essence to me of good education. And in the midst of all that, hopefully having lots of fun. Because I think that's the other thing about, sometimes I think when people think of what I call religious schools, they often think it's restrictive, and it's sort of, you've got to do knuckle down and never say anything. But that's not what we're about. We're about saying, look, God has given you that creativity, that fun side of you, and it ought to be that your best days of your life are in education. That you're enjoying it, you're with your friends. But those friends, like you, have got the similar values to you. And I think it's really important because, I don't mean this in the wrong way, but we very rarely experience any bullying in our school. And we're subject, obviously, to the government's rules about running schools. So we have all the same policies that any other school would have. But it's interesting when you look at the sort of publications that are coming out about some of the issues that are gripping the schools, the state schools particularly today, but even independent schools. I'm really appreciative of the fact that we can see where the gospel is having an impact on young people's lives. And one area in particular I think that's been really highlighted recently for me is mental health. We very rarely have any issues with mental health. And I'm convinced it's because these young people are brought up in a place where they are taught to honor the word of God and to hear God's voice in their own heart and life. And in that context, they get to know themselves and they get to know their God. And that brings a wholeness. My background is, I'm Welsh by background, and the Welsh word for salvation, for example, it means wholeness, iachawdwriaeth. And it's all about wholeness. And I think that's one of the lovely things we see with the young people here, is there seems to be a wholeness about them. Every component part of their lives, whether it's enjoying themselves, whether it's creativity, whether it's study and hard work, all combine together to shape their character. Along with an awful lot of prayer from the parents, because that's the other thing we do. Our parents are very much involved in praying for our school and supporting us through prayer. And I think that's really a crucial part of it. I mean, we're grateful to God that we had a very successful ISI report and visit last November 2023. We passed that, which was really encouraging for everybody, because as anyone knows who has an Ofsted inspection, it's a very scary time, shall we say, and you're never quite sure what it's going to turn out like. But we're grateful to God for that. And I think the changes that we've been implementing in the school with a view to some of the things I've just talked to you about are key to that. And again, that focus on the well-being of the students in relation to their faith in God makes a real difference. And I want to sing and shout about that, to be honest, because that's something I'm really delighted to see in our school. It's not to say that we don't experience challenges and difficulties. Every school does, because you're shaping the lives of young people. But I have to say, the grace of God is very much felt in our school and experienced, I think, by the pupils and the staff alike.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is saying to people, look, I believe that we're all made not just with a purpose, but we're made on purpose. So we're made on purpose with purpose. And I think that's something that I kind of infuse, hopefully, other people with, because it's one of those things I always try to say that the idea of the random, I understand where that comes from, but actually I believe we're all made with purpose and on purpose. And therefore we've all got a place in this world, and it's helping people to discover that place that they have, how they can influence people around them. And I think that's what I'm getting across from what you're saying. How big is Maranatha School then? What sort of size, what ages of children?
Well, at the minute, we've got about 62 pupils in the school. We can go up to 90. Last summer, we were up at about 80. We had a number of families move away, some overseas with work and stuff like that. That's the thing with a smaller school. The fluctuations do affect you more than say a larger school, for example. I guess we're sort of where we are, 60 plus. I think probably by September, we think we'll be about 75, which is great. Yeah. Some of the families that come are on bursaries, because we recognize because it's independent education, you do have to pay for it. We try to, we've got this balance of trying to keep our fees as low as we can. You always got that challenge, really. Whilst at the same time trying to make sure you've got a pretty good standard of education. And that's a difficult challenge. That's some of the challenges that I imagine every independent school faces in that sense. How do you keep the doors open, balance the books, and provide a good education. So those are why other things that we face as well, sort of thing. Yeah, yeah.
You say that you've been at the school for a few years. What were you a teacher before? What was your journey into becoming a head teacher at this school?
That's a good question. Well, basically, my children attended here many, many years ago. Um, my journey is I started working life in the Ministry of Defence. I spent about 8 years within the Ministry of Defence, and I went to work for an IT consultancy, and did that for about 8 years. And that was a very well paid job, so I could afford to put my children here. Bearing in mind, I've got 7 children, so and each one of them I had to pay for. Although actually I only had 5 at the time, and but it was a challenge. But I then decided in 2006 to go into full-time church ministry. I'd been running a church, an Assemblies of God church, actually, for about a few years, from 2001 to 2006. We'd seen considerable growth. We'd gone from about 40 people to about just over 100. And to be honest, full-time job, full-time ministry, and 5 young children, that was a challenge, I have to say. So I decided to go into full-time ministry, but I have to say I took a rather substantive pay cut to do that, coming out of IT consultancy. So that meant we couldn't afford to put our children in the school, so we homeschooled them. My wife homeschooled them, I should say. I was a full-time minister, running at that time 1 church, and over the years we church planted. We planted 2 other churches in Swindon, and then I started a 4th church in quite a poor area of Swindon called Pen Hill. I'd had it on my heart for some time that God has a heart, I should say, rather, for poor people, particularly, and disadvantaged people. And I really wanted to, if you don't mind me saying so, put that to the test. I believe God has a heart for people who are, in difficult situations. We started the church there, myself, my wife, and a couple of other families. But it was interesting because I'll explain. When I was a minister of the church I also started an organisation called Good News for Swindon, which was bringing together church leaders who believe in the gospel. Simple as that. And that grew, and is a great organisation. Really loved chairing that and leading that. But it continued to grow quite a bit. And one of the things we decided to do was to plant this church, but to do it with churches working together, which had never been done before, as I understand it. So there was evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal, Baptist churches, all sent a few people each to start this church in Pen Hill because they caught the vision of it. So we started that. That was about 5 years ago now. I loved that. I enjoyed that. But going from a big church to church plant a small church, I didn't really have the funds to do it. So all I can say is an opportunity came along for me to take on the role of head teacher at Maranatha, which I did. I continue to church plant, and I've got a younger guy working with me now, and God has really blessed that work. We've got a good number of people in the church now, and I'm really grateful to God for that. That's lovely, which is why I've got this passion for the gospel in terms of both the school and in terms of what I do outside of school, if that makes sense. But the two work together. One of the things I did about 10 years ago, I did a master's degree through Maranatha Hall, which was kind of under the auspices of the University of Wales, Bangor. So I managed to get a master's degree in leadership. And that was key. I think that's been key to helping me in the journey that I've been on, because I think that's one thing I'm comfortable with is leadership, if that makes sense. And so I think moving into the education sector, whilst I don't have the subject knowledge, I think a good leader, what they do is surround themselves with good people who have that. And that's what I've tried to do here at Maranatha. And that's been a real blessing because we've got some great teachers here. But when they start talking about all the complicated stuff, I just go, yeah, all right, whatever. Sounds good to me. And that's the key, isn't it? Is to strengthen your weaknesses as a leader. And that's what I sought to do, is getting some good staff here. We've got some great staff at Maranatha. There's no doubt about it. I mean, and I think we are gearing up for growth. I think that's the key. Is we've got now a vision for the future, for the school, which means it. Hopefully, by God's grace, we will grow beyond the 90 mark at some point. I think the challenge for every independent school is finance, but we leave that in God's hands, and I'm sure the Lord will help us in that regard. But yeah, and so I've been doing this for 3.5 years. We've brought in, one of the things we have done is we've brought in more qualified teachers. Before it was more of a homeschooling type curriculum, great curriculum, PACES, some people may have heard of them, AC, but I think we wanted to move from being more sort of a good homeschooling type setup to a school that provides or makes use of the gift of the qualified teacher. And I think the two seem to go together well with what we're doing, and we see that in the results, the impact on the young people. We are now delivering GCSEs, whereas we were before doing a different qualification, the International Certificate of Christian Education. What we felt was with GCSEs that they're more nationally obviously recognised, and particularly with employers and universities, etc. So yeah, that's been our direction of travel with that. Yeah.
What's your faith journey then? Clearly, your passion for the gospel is great, and I can feel that even through a Zoom call. But what was your journey of faith? Have you got a church background? Was it a Damascus Road experience? Was it gentle? What was your experience to Jesus at the start?
Well, basically, I was brought up in South Wales. I lived in the valleys in Aberystwyth. My dad took us to the local Baptist church there, a chapel. We were good friends with the minister. I didn't really know the Lord, nor did my dad, to be fair. We moved then to West Wales, to a place called, it sounds really odd, but it's a place called Cwmdu, which means Black Valley. But it was a great place. There was basically my father took us to the local chapel there, but sad to say, I never heard the gospel when I went there. And when I was 15, I basically said, my dad said to me, you don't have to go to church anymore. So I thought, great, I'm not going to. And then my dad's brother came down, and he was a born-again Christian. We didn't quite know what that meant. And we thought, well, we better take him to an English-speaking church because he won't understand it at the Welsh chapel we were going to. So we took him to a little apostolic church, Pentecostal church, in a place called Halfway, Cwmdu. And I didn't go. My brother's sister went. They were younger than me. And they came back and they said, we had a really great time. I said, what? You can't enjoy church? So I thought, I thought I'd better investigate. So I went down there, and I was 15 at the time. I was a skinhead. But it was just something they had. And I knew I didn't have it. So I get very emotional at this. And I knew they had something I didn't have. And I found out it was the Lord. And as a 15-year-old, I went to the Apostolic Convention they had in Pennygroes. There were 3,000 people there. And they had on the final, it was a week's thing, conference, they had an epilogue. And I knew I wanted to know God. I just didn't know how to. And they just, they invited us to go forward at the end. And my girlfriend who sat by me, she said, I dare you to go forward. Well, to be honest, anyone who dared me to do anything, I did it. So I went forward, and the guy prayed for me. And to be honest, I didn't feel anything or whatever, but I knew my life had changed. I had a terrible mouth on me. I was swearing like a trooper. I was terrified. My dad was really Victorian in his upbringing. So I thought, if I ever swear in front of him, he's going to give me a hiding or whatever, But that never happened, just to say. But from that moment on, my swearing stopped. That was in the summer of 1983. And then what I remember distinctly is in the February the following year, and I remember these things because they were significant for me. I went to a prayer meeting, and I just said to God, God, if you're there, if you're real, reveal yourself to me so that I know. And I'll be honest, there was no bells and whistles, no nothing, but I knew at the end of that service, God was real. And I made a decision at that point. I said, God, if you're real, then I'm going to live my life for you. There's nothing else worth doing. I mean, to me, it just, I was like, what am I wasting my life doing if it's not to serve God? If there is a God, and I deeply, passionately believe there is a God, and my experience is that too. And so from that moment on, I did my, I think I was 17 at the time then, or 16. I was doing my A levels. Did my A levels. Went to Cardiff University. I didn't do great at Cardiff University. In fact, for the first time in my life, I failed at something. And I have to say that began a journey for me of really thinking through my life. Ironically, given the job I'm doing now, it made me realize education's not everything. And that was great. I think, I felt honest, I think I was a bit arrogant, a bit proud, and that really humbled me. And I thought, oh, blooming heck, I joined the civil service, like I said, joined the MOD for 8 years as a direct entrant EO, blah, blah, blah. All the time I got involved in a local church in Swindon. It was an Assemblies of God church. Great church. There was a pastor there, great guy. He taught me loads, to be honest, mentored me. And then I took over from him because he retired, believe it or not, with really bad back problems. He moved to Inverness. And then I took over the church. When I took over the church, I just wet behind the ears, didn't really know much. I think I read Rick Warren's book, Purpose Driven Church, and that really helped me because I just think, what is church really? When you're just in the congregation, you just take it for granted. When you're put in charge, you think, what am I supposed to be doing? That was a helpful book. And to be honest, I decided from that point on, I needed a team around me because the church was growing substantially. And I just couldn't do it. And then I never felt comfortable being on my own. I never felt that was what God wanted. And so we created a leadership team, and we, followed some principles there in terms of developing a team. The church grew, and that was great. I had a blast, to be honest. I really enjoyed it. And then I said, went into full-time ministry 2006. I enjoyed full-time ministry. Looking back, I wish I'd done it part-time. Perhaps that's a bad confession to make. I'll be honest, I didn't think there was enough to do. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I need to be busy. I need to be, challenged and stuff like that. That's my nature. Anyway, it was good. I enjoyed it. I loved it. Did it for 16 years. As I said, came into doing headship then. And I'm doing both now, if that makes sense. But the guy that I brought in at Penn Hill is now the guy who's in charge, and I'm more of a consultant to him, really, because I have explained to him I can't give the time running a school to the sort of stuff I used to do, if that makes sense. And that's me. That's my story in a way. Grateful to God for His grace in my life. I have to say, He has been so good to me and my family. My children are all grown up now and serving God in different ways, and I'm very grateful and humbled by that, to be honest. Yeah.
Wow. I love how God can take what we do and then, my wife calls it professionally transferable skills, which sounds fancy. My version would be God doesn't waste anything. Everything is good. God can redeem stuff that's not great. And if it's good, He can make it even better. And it's really exciting to hear some of your story about how God, brought you to recognize who He was and the transformative power of that in your life. And I can see and understand why you want to give the children at Maranatha School the same opportunity to have that possibility for themselves to consider, is this what I want? Is God real? And just to give them that opportunity. And I love that. And again, it comes back to that. We're made with purpose on purpose. Bear Grylls, I've just read his book about climbing Everest. And I'm reading another book now from him about crossing the North Atlantic. And he talks about how he chose his team for the boat. And he said, the thing is, good leaders choose people who are better than them at certain skills, because you can't know everything. You can't do everything. So surround yourself with people who are better than you at doing the job, and then you lead and facilitate and manage all that. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you at the school is you're surrounding yourself with people who have different skills, and rather than it threatening you, you're celebrating how good they are. And I love that.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the principle I did when I was in church leadership, and I think one of the big things I learned was, like you said, surround yourself with people who are better than you, and they'll make you look good. Sorry, that's my humorous take on it, to be honest. Well, capable people. I mean, I'm great. One of the best leadership books I ever read was Jim Collins' From Good to Great, and he puts in there 5 principles of great leadership. And I think some of those principles are, a lot of church leaders could benefit from, to be honest, in terms of building a team and having a vision. Really, really key, really, really key. Some great. What I'm just saying is, a lot of stuff I've learned on my journey from secular and spiritual leaders in that sense. And I would just encourage people, like you just saying, reading good books about leadership and equipping yourself to be a better person. Because at the end of the day, I sound odd to put it this way, but I'm haunted in a way by the parable of Jesus, about the man who was given talents and what he did with those talents. And I think, we've all got a responsibility, haven't we, to use what God has given us to the best that we can. That's all we can do. But if we do that, then we can be at peace with ourselves. God will bless that and give us fruit. Yeah.
I don't know that we can finish any better a statement, really, than that. Just give us details if people want to find out more about Maranatha School, whereabouts you are and what's the website.
Sure. So Maranatha School is set in the countryside, just outside of Swindon, in a village called Sevenhampton. We're based on a farm, basically, and it's a working farm as well that surrounds us. So lots and lots of fresh air here. If people want to get in touch with us, our website is maranathaschool.org. I think the key with Maranatha, I always say to people on the phone, is think of an A after every word. Maranatha school. And come, find out a bit about us. I mean, if I was honest with you, the biggest challenge we face is trying to, connect with people who, in the nicest possible way, can help us. I find that very difficult. I think we're clear about our vision and what we want to accomplish. We see that, investing in the lives of young people and discipling them so that they can serve the Lord all the days of their life. And that's the key here. I'll come back to that if you don't mind me. When they leave us at 16, they've got a whole lifetime of serving God ahead of them. If we do a good job here, then they will be a blessing to the church for potentially 70, 80 years. But it's trying to help other Christians, I think, to see the value of that. And we would like others to join us in this endeavor, to be inspired to support a ministry that reaches young people. And if you think about it, and again, as a church leader, I get this. If we're in Penn Hill, we get an hour a week in Sunday school with children that come to us from the community to impact them with the gospel. In the school, I get 33 and a half hours every week to impact these young people, to pray with them, to encourage them, to inspire them, to be an example to them. And I would love more people to see that vision and get on board with it, really, in whatever way, through prayer, through support, through encouragement, because what we're doing is the work of the Lord. There's no doubt about it. And it's one of the reasons I got involved with the school as a minister, was because I was frustrated that I wasn't able to impact young people's lives in the way that I wanted to as a minister. In a school, I don't mean this the wrong way, but they're a captive audience and their parents are all on board and they want this to happen. And that's lovely, And to be honest, not being funny, all the young people, they're really engaged. I mean, we have an assembly, and when we have a prayer time, I have to stop them because there's too many of them praying, which is, I never thought I'd see that, but I'm genuine when I say this. It is lovely to hear those young children, young people praying and asking the Lord to get involved in their daily lives, and praying for others, of course. And I think, if people could see that, I think when people come here, the comment we hear when they've been here, especially first-time visitors, is, God is in this place. And I say this deliberately. We have purposely made room for God's presence in this school. We say, Lord, we want you to be at the heart of all we're doing. Bless the work of our hands in that sense, and let it be successful for your kingdom. And I think if people could see a vision for that, I think a lot more people would be behind Christian education in that sense, and see the fruit of it when it's done well. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you, Andy.
No, it's great. Thank you. It's been fascinating. Finding about some of your journey. Grant said you were a fascinating character. He was correct. I love some of the stories about there. So thank you so much for your time, Tom. Really grateful for learning more about you, your life. I love delving into people's lives and sharing their stories. That's what I love to do, because it's how we get to meet some amazing people and find out some amazing things, and it can transform us in the best of ways. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. God bless you too.